Welcome to Fiery Nights, where the darkest stories unfold in the stillness of the night. Where are you listening from tonight? Which country are you in? And what time is it there right now? Are you safely curled up in your room, or perhaps surrounded by the noise of others? Or maybe you find yourself in a quiet, haunting place alone with your thoughts and the whispers of something far more sinister. Wherever you are, I invite you to settle in. Tonight's tale will take you into the heart of darkness, a place where the line between the living and the dead is thin, and the silence is deafening. The forest stretched endlessly, its dark, oppressive presence swallowing every sound. The trees, ancient and towering, their gnarled limbs twisted like broken hands reaching up to an unseen sky, stood in solemn silence. This was a forest that had long been forgotten, its name lost to time and whispers of those who dared to venture near. Even in daylight, it spoke of an ominous stillness, a quiet so deep it felt as though it was pushing against your very soul. The wind, or what little of it there was, carried a coldness that seeped into your bones, a chill that had no place in the warmth of the sun. There were no birds here, no rustling of leaves in the breeze. The air was dead, stifling, and still. Silence. Absolute, suffocating silence. But that wasn't what unsettled you the most. No, it was the feeling that something unseen was always watching, that just beyond the reach of your vision, something moved. A flicker in the corner of your eye, a shadow that never seemed to settle. The forest, ancient and full of secrets, held its breath. It was waiting. The ground beneath your feet was soft, damp with the remnants of forgotten rain. But there was something else in the soil, something ancient, decayed. The earth smelled of rot, not the decay one might expect, but something older, more sinister. The very earth seemed to be alive with it, as though the forest had been holding its breath for centuries. As you walked deeper, the trees began to grow thicker, their trunks twisting and winding like living creatures. The branches overhead formed dark canopies, blocking out what little light there was, creating a world that felt entirely its own. And as the shadows lengthened, you felt something else, a creeping sensation that something was near, watching you from just beyond sight. The deeper you went, the heavier the silence grew. It was as though the very air pressed down upon you, each breath harder to take than the last. Yet you moved forward. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe it was the pull of something darker, but you couldn't stop. The feeling that something was just ahead, something waiting, kept you moving. Night fell without warning. The sky darkened, and with it, the forest became even more suffocating. The moon, obscured by clouds, offered little help, and the trees, black and twisted against the dim sky, only deepened the shadows around you. You felt like you were descending further into something ancient and full of dread, and yet there was no turning back now. The wind, which had been absent, now returned. But it was strange. It carried a weight, a chill that cut through the air. But there was no rustling of leaves, no movement of branches. The forest was alive, yet entirely still. Then, just as you began to feel the weight of the darkness press in on you, you heard it. A whisper, soft at first, barely there but undeniably present. It was a voice, a murmur that floated on the edge of your perception. At first it was unintelligible, a string of garbled noises caught on the wind, but as time passed it became clearer. The words, if they were words, were not in any language you could understand. They were like the murmur of something ancient, something other, calling from the darkness. The voice seemed to curl around the roots and branches as if alive, a presence that reached out and touched everything it passed. And yet, no one was there. Nothing was visible. A chill ran down your spine, but you couldn't stop. The whisper grew louder, closer, more insistent. It was beckoning, calling, and you could feel it. The force behind the voice, the pull of something unseen but undeniably present, was too strong. It felt like the forest itself was reaching for you. You took a step forward, your eyes scanning the darkness, your pulse quickening. The voice echoed through the trees, growing louder and clearer, as if it had been waiting for you to hear it. It was like a presence, like the forest itself was speaking, calling you, urging you onward, and then you felt it. The gaze. You were being watched. The trees around you, once merely silhouettes, now seemed to loom over you like silent sentinels. The shadows beneath them deepened, and the branches overhead twisted like broken limbs, reaching down as though to trap you, to hold you in place. The weight of it all pressed against your chest, suffocating, yet you couldn't stop. The feeling of eyes upon you, of something unseen but deeply present, was too much to ignore. Suddenly there was a rustling, soft, like the sound of dry leaves moving, but it didn't come from the trees. No, it came from deeper within the forest, from the very earth beneath your feet, as though something was shifting in the soil, something that was buried deep, waiting to emerge. The rustling grew louder, closer, like footsteps moving through the underbrush. You stopped. Your heart pounded in your chest, a drumbeat in the stillness. But the sound stopped too. Everything froze. For a moment there was nothing but the pounding of your own heart, echoing in your ears, as though even the forest was holding its breath. And then again, footsteps. Closer now. Too close. You turned, your body stiff with fear, but there was nothing. The forest remained still, too still. The footsteps faded, but you couldn't shake the feeling that something was there. Something was moving just beyond the reach of your sight. You took a few more steps, hesitant, but the air around you had shifted. It was charged now, like the air before a storm. The earth beneath your feet seemed to pulse with something unseen, as though the very ground was alive. And then you saw it, a tree, taller and older than the rest. Its bark was dark, cracked and twisted like the face of something ancient. But what caught your attention was the hollow. The massive hollow in the trunk, dark and deep as though something was hiding inside it. A darkness so pure it seemed to swallow the very light. You couldn't look away. And as you stepped closer, you felt the air grow heavier. The whispering returned. Louder now, clearer. It was coming from inside the tree, as though the voice was embedded in the very wood itself, reaching out to you from the darkness within. And then, a sound, a low creak, like something was moving inside the tree, but there was nothing. No movement, just the sensation of something pressing against the walls of the hollow, as if it were trying to break free. Your heart skipped a beat, and in that instant, you realized you weren't alone. Something was with you. The presence behind you, just beyond your reach, was closer now. A breath, heavy and slow. The air seemed to thicken and you felt it. The eyes, those unseen eyes watching, waiting. The thing that had been following you, guiding you, was finally here. Your breath caught in your throat. You couldn't move. Every step had led you here, to this tree, to this hollow, and the thing that had been watching was inside. Then, the ground beneath you shifted. The earth seemed to tremble, and in the blink of an eye, the forest around you grew darker. The shadows swallowed everything. The trees, the branches, the very sky, all faded into an oppressive void, and yet you could feel it. The thing inside the tree was no longer hiding. It was reaching for you, pulling you in, its presence suffocating, wrapping around you like vines. The whispering grew louder, a chorus now echoing from every corner of the forest, from every shadow. It was no longer just one voice. It was many, all calling to you, all pulling you in. Your legs gave way and you fell to the ground, your body unable to bear the weight of the unseen forces pressing down on you. The earth, the trees, the very air. All seemed to bend toward you, as though they were drawing you deeper into the forest's heart. And just as you thought you could escape, just as you thought you could run, you realized there was no escape. The forest had you now. The thing inside the tree, the presence that had been watching, had found you. And the last thing you heard before the darkness swallowed you whole was the whisper. You were always meant to be here. Story 2. The forest had always been there. silent and ancient, stretching out in every direction like a dark sea of trees. It was vast, too vast for anyone to truly understand. There were no roads here, no trails to follow, and no way of knowing where the forest ended and where it began. The locals spoke of it only in whispers, never daring to venture too far inside. They called it the Silent Forest, and for good reason. The air here was different, thick and heavy with the weight of unspoken things. It felt as though the very ground had been waiting for something, waiting for you. The trees, towering and ancient, stood still as sentinels, watching, waiting. Their dark limbs reached into the sky, their twisted trunks twisting like the fingers of something lost and forgotten. Their leaves barely stirred, as if they too were afraid to disturb the silence. No animals lived here, or so it seemed. No birds sang, no insects buzzed, and no footsteps echoed across the soil. There was only the silence, the kind of silence that wrapped itself around you, filling your ears, your lungs, your soul. It was a silence that felt alive, pressing down on you with every step you took. A silence that grew thicker as you ventured deeper, and you had ventured deep. The further you went, the more the trees seemed to close in around you. Their trunks became thicker, their bark darker. The undergrowth grew wild, twisting into labyrinths of thorns and vines that seemed to claw at your skin. But you couldn't stop now. You had to keep going. You weren't sure why you had come here. Someone had told you to. Or perhaps it had been the whispers you had heard in your dreams, the calls you had felt in your bones. The silent forest had been waiting, and you had answered. The path beneath your feet was faint, barely visible, like the memory of something that had once been. It wound through the trees, leading you deeper into the forest's heart, where the shadows grew darker and the air colder. Every now and then you thought you saw something, a flicker, a shadow in the corner of your eye. But when you turned, there was nothing there, nothing but the darkness. Then, you heard it. A faint rustling sound, like something moving in the underbrush. But there was nothing. Not a creature, not a leaf disturbed by wind, just the feeling of something moving just out of sight. Your heart began to race. The rustling stopped, and for a moment, there was only the sound of your own breath, ragged and uneven. You strained your ears listening. The silence was oppressive, but it was not the silence you had grown used to. This was different. It felt wrong. A flash of movement. You turned quickly, but the forest around you was still, and yet the feeling remained. The presence. Something was here. You took a step back, but the ground beneath your feet felt different now. Soft, spongy, as though it had given way to something beneath. You looked down. A patch of dark earth soaked in damp spread out before you. It almost seemed to breathe. The ground shifted slightly as though it was alive, and then a crack. It was subtle at first, but unmistakable. The sound of something breaking, splintering. The earth around you trembled ever so slightly, and then you saw it. A crack in the earth spreading wide beneath your feet. Before you could step away, the ground gave way completely. You fell, and then everything went dark. When you woke, the first thing you noticed was the smell. It wasn't the earthy scent of the forest anymore. No, it was something else. Damp, moldy, stale. It was the smell of decay, the smell of things long forgotten. The darkness around you was absolute, but you could feel the walls pressing in. You couldn't move. Your body felt heavy, as though the air itself had become thick with the weight of something unseen. You tried to stand, but your legs were weak. Your hands, trembling, reached out in front of you. But there was only darkness. The air felt oppressive, thick with a cold that seemed to seep into your very bones. You were not alone. The sense of being watched, of something unseen. But now, it was more intense. There were no more whispers, no sounds, just the feeling of eyes, countless eyes staring at you from the darkness. You could feel them pressing in, surrounding you. The ground beneath you shifted again. It was subtle but unmistakable. Something moved. Slowly. Deliberately. Something was coming closer. The air grew colder, and with it the smell of decay grew stronger. You couldn't see it, but you could feel it. Something was in the dark with you. The walls around you were closing in, narrowing with every passing moment. The silence was broken now, not by sound but by the movement of the earth itself. The crack in the ground had spread, and beneath you could feel the roots of the trees, the ancient trees of the silent forest, twisting around you. They had been waiting for you, just as the whispers had promised. The floor beneath you gave way again, and you tumbled into a deeper pit. You hit the ground hard, pain lancing up your side, but before you could move, you heard it. The low creak of wood, the sound of something ancient and alive stirring from its resting place. And then the whispers returned. Only they were no longer whispers. They were voices, not one, not two, but countless voices, coming from everywhere, from the very walls around you. They spoke in a language you could not understand, but the words were heavy, pressing against you, suffocating you. You could feel the words in your bones, in your chest, vibrating, crawling alive, and in the center of it all, in the suffocating blackness, there was a presence, something older than time itself, something that had been waiting, watching, hungry. You could feel it closing in. There was no escape, and then the forest spoke. You should not have come. The words echoed through your mind, not spoken aloud but felt, pressed against your consciousness. You tried to scream, but no sound escaped your throat. The walls of the pit squeezed tighter. The air became thicker, suffocating. You tried to crawl, to move, but the darkness was all around you. The presence was too powerful now. It was pulling you in, drawing you toward it. The trees, the very earth itself, were alive with it. And just as you thought you would be consumed, just as you thought you would be swallowed whole by the silent forest, you felt it. A hand, cold, thin. Bony fingers wrapped around your ankle, pulling you deeper into the earth, deeper into the blackness. You screamed, your voice hoarse, but there was no one to hear. The hands of the forest, long forgotten, long buried, were pulling you under. And as you were dragged deeper into the suffocating darkness, the last thing you heard was a whisper. You were always meant to be here. Story 3. The silent forest had always been a place of legend, a dark expanse where no one dared to wander. Those who had entered it, or so the rumors claimed, had never returned. Or worse, returned only to speak of nothing. The forest was old, older than any living memory, its roots winding deep into the earth, whispering tales of forgotten times. Its name was known to all, yet its true nature was understood by very few. It wasn't just the stories that kept people away, but the overwhelming sense that something was wrong with it. The trees, though ancient, were too still. The air was too thick. The wind, if it could even be called that, never blew as it should. There was no life within its bounds. No birds, no insects, no rustling leaves. Just a quiet, a suffocating silence that seemed to wrap itself around everything, choking the very air. For as long as anyone could remember, the silent forest was avoided. But tonight something was different. You had come, driven by a curiosity that you couldn't shake. The stories, the warnings, they had become too much. You had to know. What was it that drew people into its depths, only to disappear? As you approached the edge of the forest, the temperature dropped. The trees before you loomed like giants, their bark dark and almost black against the dying light of dusk. Their branches hung low, reaching toward you as though they longed to touch you, to pull you into their grasp. Your feet shuffled over the leaf-strewn ground, and with each step, you could feel the forest's pull, like a gentle tug on your soul. A single distant owl hooted, breaking the oppressive silence. But there was something strange about that sound, something unnatural. The way the owl's call echoed through the trees sounded almost distorted, like it had traveled through time and space before reaching your ears. The chill in the air deepened, and you couldn't help but wonder if the night itself was alive, aware of your presence. The deeper you went, the darker it became. The trees closed in tighter. their trunks now so thick they seemed to push the light away. Your path became narrower, the earth beneath you softer, as though it was swallowing your every step. The weight of the silence hung heavy. Your breath came out in ragged bursts, but there was no sound in the forest, only the soft press of your footfalls against the earth. Then, the forest shifted. The ground beneath you gave way slightly and you stumbled, catching yourself against a tree. The bark was damp, slick to the touch, and there was an odd texture to it, like flesh. Breathing. The air grew even colder, and you could see your breath now, forming little white clouds that hung in the air before vanishing into the stillness. You looked up. The trees were no longer just trees. They were something else entirely. The trunks twisted and knotted. Their branches seemed to move subtly, not with the wind but with some purpose, as if watching you. You weren't just walking through a forest. You were walking through something alive, and then you saw it. A figure standing just beyond the tree line, shrouded in shadow. It was too still, too quiet. At first you thought it was another person, but the longer you stared, the more it seemed to blend with the forest itself, becoming one with the shadows. Its shape was barely discernible, like a wisp of smoke caught between the trees. You froze. The figure didn't move. But then, from deep within the forest, from somewhere beyond the trees, came the sound of footsteps. Slow. Measured. Not your own. You turned sharply. There was nothing behind you, only the dense forest and the oppressive silence. Your heart raced. You took a few steps forward, but the footsteps persisted, following the rhythm of your own, as though they mirrored your every move. You tried to quicken your pace, but the steps matched it. The presence, the shadowy figure, was gone, but now the air was thick with something else. Anticipation. The trees, once silent sentinels, now seemed to breathe in time with the footsteps. Their branches creaked and groaned, bending in unnatural angles, a rustle from above. No, not from the trees, from the sky. The leaves above began to stir, but it wasn't the usual sway of the wind. The movement was deliberate, the branches parting slightly as though something was trying to break free, trying to make its presence known. You stopped. Your heart pounded. The footsteps stopped too. The world seemed to hold its breath. And then, you heard it. A whisper. Faint at first, but growing clearer with every second. Do you know why you are here? The voice was soft, sweet, like a lullaby. But it wasn't comforting. It was invasive, pulling at the very core of your being. It filled your head, your chest, your mind. Do you know why you came? You tried to move, but your feet felt rooted to the ground. Something was holding you here, keeping you in place. It wasn't the trees. It wasn't the ground. It was the forest itself. The whisper came again, louder this time, as though the trees themselves were speaking to you, calling you. You should never have come, but now that you have, there is no leaving. Suddenly the air was alive with sound. The forest groaned, the trees shifting as if they were stretching, waking. The ground trembled beneath your feet and the whispering grew to a crescendo. You looked around in a panic, your breath coming faster. The trees seemed to close in on you, their bark now bulging outward, their twisted limbs reaching for you with unnatural speed. It was as though the very forest had become sentient, alive, and now it had you in its grasp. The branches above swayed with alarming speed. They scraped against each other like claws, grating with an unnatural sound that reverberated in your skull. Each rustle, each creak felt like a warning, but you couldn't decipher it. The world around you was shifting, contorting as though it were no longer bound by the laws of nature. Time seemed to bend here, and with it, the forest pulsed with a dark rhythm, like a heart that had never stopped beating. The whisper came again, louder this time, filling the entire air around you. You can feel it, can't you? The forest is waking and it is hungry. Panic surged through your body, your breath coming out in sharp, ragged gasps. Every instinct told you to run, but your legs felt heavy, like they were made of stone. You tried to turn, to flee, but the path had disappeared. The trees were now so close that you could feel their damp, cold trunks brushing against your skin, pressing in from all sides. Suddenly, there was movement. A form emerging from the ground, slowly, as though it had been buried there for centuries, waiting for the right moment to rise. A creature, its face hidden by the dark cloak of the forest, its limbs long and unnaturally thin. It seemed to rise as though the earth itself were lifting it. The ground shifted beneath it, cracking and splintering as its body emerged. The air around it seemed to bend and twist as though even the atmosphere couldn't bear its presence. The figure stood tall, impossibly tall, its shape shifting and bending as it moved. Its body seemed to flicker in and out of existence, the edges of its form warping like smoke. Its eyes, glowing faintly with an unnatural light, pierced the darkness. The glow was not warm but cold, like the light of a dying star. It was the color of things that should never be seen, like the depths of the sea or the void between stars. The figure's limbs stretched unnaturally, bending in angles that no living creature should be able to achieve. Its fingers, long and spindly, stretched out toward you, each movement slow and deliberate, as if savoring the moment. It was coming for you. Panic surged through your body, your heartbeat pounding in your ears. You tried to run, to move, but your legs were like lead. Your feet were stuck to the ground, and each movement felt like a battle against the very earth itself. The creature's eyes never left you as it continued its slow approach, its form flickering with every step it took. The trees groaned and creaked above you, their limbs twisting and bending, almost as if they were eager to watch the creature's progress. The ground beneath you quaked as though the forest itself was shifting, creating a cage around you. The path you had once followed was now completely gone, replaced by a maze of shadows and flickering forms. The presence of the creature grew stronger, enveloping you, suffocating you with its presence. The world around you spun. The footsteps, the whispers, everything was closing in on you. The darkness deepened, swirling around you like a storm. Your chest tightened with fear, and the cold air felt like it was clawing at your skin. You could hear the sound of the creature's steps now, echoing in the silence, the weight of each movement vibrating through the earth beneath you. And then, as if the creature had finally reached you, it stopped. The world seemed to hold its breath, and for a moment there was silence. But that silence felt different. It was the calm before the storm, the eerie stillness that filled the air just before the inevitable happened. The creature's cold fingers brushed against your skin. You recoiled in horror, but your body was still rooted to the spot. Its touch was like ice, cold and deathly. It was like the very essence of the forest, the essence of something ancient and malevolent. Its fingers dug into your skin, its touch sending a shock of cold through your veins. You should have stayed away. The forest is hungry, and now, so are you. The words echoed in your head, but they were not spoken aloud. The voice was no longer a whisper. It was a scream, tearing through your consciousness, reverberating in every fiber of your being. The earth beneath you groaned, and you felt yourself being pulled down into the depths. You struggled, but the more you struggled, the tighter the grip of the forest became. The ground opened beneath you, and you felt yourself falling, sinking deeper into the earth. The soil clung to you, pulling you down, as though the forest itself was trying to swallow you whole. Your breath became ragged, each inhale a battle. Your limbs felt heavy, your body unresponsive, as though the very air had become too thick to move through. The creature's grip on you tightened, its skeletal fingers digging deeper into your flesh. And then, with one final scream, you felt yourself drawn into the earth, the very soil beneath you reaching up, pulling you down, pulling you into the depths of the silent forest. The trees above whispered as you sank further, their voices becoming a dull hum in the distance. The creature's glowing eyes followed you, watching as you disappeared into the depths of the forest, where no light could reach, where you would remain forever. The earth beneath you trembled as the pull became stronger, dragging you deeper into the very bowels of the forest. Every movement of your body felt sluggish, as though the forest itself was weighing you down, pulling you into its eternal grasp. The cold of the creature's fingers had spread through your entire body, reaching deep into your bones, freezing your very soul. You could feel the weight of the darkness pressing against you, suffocating, choking, each breath harder to take than the last. As you descended into the earth, the forest above you seemed to close in, the trees twisting in unnatural, contorted shapes, as though they were reaching down after you. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of voices filling your mind. They were no longer soft like before. They were screaming, crying, begging for release. But no matter how hard you fought, no matter how much you struggled, you could not escape. The forest had taken you, and there would be no leaving. And then, just as you thought you could no longer endure, you heard something else. A sound. Faint at first, but unmistakable. Laughter. It echoed from the depths of the forest. Not a joyous laugh, but a cold, hollow sound, as though the forest itself were mocking you. The laughter surrounded you, bouncing off the twisted trees, bouncing off the very soil, resonating in your mind, in your chest, in your bones. It was the sound of something ancient, something that had seen too much, something that thrived on the suffering of those who dared enter its domain. The pull of the earth continued, but now it felt different, like it was alive, like it was feeding on you, consuming you. Your body began to stiffen, your thoughts becoming clouded. The world around you began to fade, the darkness closing in, the laughter growing louder, more frantic. It was no longer just the forest's hunger. It was yours, too. You felt your senses begin to slip away, your mind blurring as the forest pulled you deeper into its heart. And then, in the final moment, you felt the last part of yourself, your consciousness, vanish completely. And in that final soul-crushing moment, you understood. The silent forest didn't just consume the body, it consumed the very essence of who you were.